Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Press Club with me, Kendall Burton, and my co-host, Mr. Earl Buske, where we review the big stories making news each and every week. And as usual, we review the stories in the newspapers for the day. We start with the Voice newspaper. Too much debt, $2.9 billion. The headlines for the Voice newspaper, photograph of the minister, Dr. Eubulus Raymond, finance minister. The Star newspaper, as international pressure mounts for impacts resolution, Prime Minister confronts nightmare. Who will be my next DPP? And the much awaited, will new government embrace Project Jafali? Remember from last week, he promised more on the mysterious Jafali report. The Mirror newspaper, not business as usual. New UWP administration vows to galvanize states' economic matters. And of course, we have the usual insights from the Star newspaper and the Voice newspaper. The Voice, the Yo magazine. The headline here, a mad return. And the focus for the Tonight magazine, the just concluded Mercury Beach event. And of course, the Sports and Health magazine, St. Lucia won ECVA Women's Under 23 title. Where do we start?
Well, since we have no headlines.
You think we have no headlines?
The newspapers have headlines, but none of the stories seem to be headlines.
Yeah. Jump out at
the
you.
question about a new DPP, I mean, that has been an issue since January.
Yeah, and that story is buried all the way on page 19.
Yeah, the front page of the Mirror, not business as usual, new UWP administration vows to galvanize states' economic matters. That's an election promise. Too much debt. What's new about new governments inheriting old debts? The size of the debt is neither here nor there. It's a matter of how the debt is managed, and one would hope to hear, because we still haven't heard, a plan to rescue the country from $2.9 billion worth of debt, 800 million of which was said to have been accrued in the last 4 years. Debts are national debts, whether it is paid for by a UWP or a Labour administration. Every government has to borrow. Every new administration inherits debts, and therefore quite a lot of the talk about the debt, about the state of the economy, even about the question of absence of a deputy speaker months after election, all of these to me, as we speak, are much ado about nothing. Because when it comes to the deputy speaker, the only person who can appoint a deputy speaker is the Prime Minister. Even if the opposition were to nominate somebody, if the Prime Minister doesn't support that nomination, it will be shut down by his majority. The problem facing the Prime Minister is that he has appointed every winning candidate from his party, and as well as appointed senators. So he is being advised to do like Prime Minister Compton did when it was his turn, when he asked Marcus Nicholas to stand down from the ministerial cabinet position that he had been given in order to serve as deputy leader. So that is an issue that is going to be resolved when the time comes to resolve it, and that is at some point, if and when the speaker either has to travel or is unable to perform her functions in the House, then either the House meeting will be postponed or the Prime Minister will be forced to force one of his MPs or cabinet ministers to take up the position. The other issue, insofar as the who will be the new DPP, that's been an issue ever since December of last year, when the last DPP went on pre-retirement leave. It is not only now known that the salary of the DPP in St. Lucia is not as high as in other territories, but I'm not aware that it is the salary that has not attracted a new DPP. What I think is the reason is that the post has not been advertised. And St. Lucians need to be told that the Prime Minister cannot appoint a DPP. The Minister of Justice cannot appoint a DPP. It is the Judicial and Legal Services Commission that appoints a DPP. And the Prime Minister cannot decide that the DPP is going to be a St. Lucian either, because the applications will go all over the region. And at the end of the day, a political decision will be made insofar as to who eventually gets it. But at the end of the day, like I said, the political decision will be made after the Judicial and Legal Services Commission has made its recommendation. The government then can either say yea or nay. So really, as to who will be the next DPP, the Prime Minister doesn't know. So the issues, I think, that need to be addressed, like I keep saying, have more to do with where do we go from here. You have a new administration inheriting an economy that it admits is not at its best, but which the last administration can prove it took out of the red and brought into the black. Interestingly, the figures on the debt are being spoken of from the standpoint of who incurred the debt and who is to pay. And we in the press got to go beyond that. We've got to go beyond looking at just reflecting what is said by the policymakers, but being in a position to question them more, to question policymakers, to question the critics. You know, examine whether the critics are only being critical without coming up with recommendations. Examine whether the government is giving information and holding back. The Prime Minister explained that well, I'm not sure whether he explained, but a press release said the Prime Minister left for China
this week.
This week. That is a big story because St. Lucia has diplomatic relations with Taiwan. The Prime Minister of St. Lucia jets off to Hong Kong, mainland China, before ever having visited Taiwan. The press release says he's going to China with Minister in the Ministry of External Affairs, Sarah Flood, and the new head of GoInvest, Pinkley Francis. So the three have gone to China to visit the properties and the businesses being run in China by Desert Star Holding, the company that plans to develop 700 acres in Beaufort. That trip in itself is a whole story, because like I said, number one, he's going off to China, where we do not have diplomatic relations with China, but a country with diplomatic relations with Taiwan. The Prime Minister is in China. Of course, the press release has clarified that he didn't go to China to meet with the Chinese government. He didn't go to negotiate re-establishment of diplomatic relations with China. He merely went to China through Beijing to get to Hong Kong. The press release says after China, mainland China, the Prime Minister will go to Taiwan. Whether he'll be taking a flight from Hong Kong to Taiwan, or whether he's going to be going back to London to go to Taiwan, or from New York, I'm not sure how he's going to get to Taiwan from China. However, the purpose for visiting Taiwan, according to the press release, is that the Prime Minister is going to go to Taiwan to set the basis for a state visit. Now, a state visit by the Prime Minister normally should be organized by the ambassadors at the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I think this is the first time we're hearing a head of state saying, listen, I am going to arrange for a state visit.
So I'm going to ask you what I asked previously. Who is advising the Prime Minister? Because there are a lot of questions about these trips. I mean, are they necessary? Who's arranging them? Who's paying for them? You know, how beneficial are they to the state overall? You know, when you visit Morocco and you have a Moroccan embassy or ambassador here in St. Lucia, was that trip absolutely necessary? As you're pointing out now, the purpose for this trip to Taiwan, is it absolutely necessary when you have a Taiwanese embassy right here?
Yeah, well, these are the issues. Clearly, the Prime Minister has not named a political advisor, a political attaché. You know, the previous Ministry of Foreign Affairs had Vaughan Lewis as its senior advisor. His role was to advise the Foreign Affairs Minister, who is now the Prime Minister. Because we've got to remember the Prime Minister is both Minister of Tourism and Minister of Foreign Affairs, and plus being Prime Minister. He's going to be spending up until the end of August between China and Taiwan. He would have spent most of the last 2 weeks, or when the end of August comes, he would have spent most of the month on those trips. The trip to China, I would imagine, is being paid for by Desert Star Holdings. Who's paying for the trip to Taiwan? It has to be us, because Desert Star will not pay for a trip to Taiwan. It has no business there. These are issues. We have a way. We're due for a break, but when we come back, I think what I want to look at is the way in which we choose when we quarrel about money. We want to concentrate on the Prime Minister's trips, and we want to know who's going to pay. And then I listen to popular programs where the issue of the Prime Minister in Parliament and his inability to move the bill, that has been a big issue. But then I listened to a commentator concluding that, yeah, it looked bad, but that ain't costing us a cent. So on the basis of it not costing us a cent, we can take it.
Overlook it.
We can overlook it.
Would you for a break, as you said? Let's take it. When we come back, we'll look at some of the other issues in the news, including those issues that you just brought up. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the Press Club. Before the break, we were talking about some of the issues associated with the trip to China and Taiwan, as well as the need for the media to ask deeper questions about some of the issues that are attendant to those trips. The trip to Morocco, for example, is one issue for me. The Desert Star Holding project is another issue. Granted, there was a press conference last week or week before where Invest St. Lucia attempted to shed some light on that deal, but there were a lot more questions that were left unanswered than answered. Same thing with this trip to Morocco and London. We have the Prime Minister and the Minister for Agriculture calling a press conference, which I think was premature. It turns out to be premature by their own admittance. Why call a press conference if we're not prepared to give the details on what the outcome of the trip to Morocco and France is until you have conversations with Windfresh? Why not meet with Windfresh first, then come to the public and say, this is what we discussed in France and with the Moroccans. This is what we discussed with Windfresh. This is the way forward for the revitalization of the banana industry, which I understand is the ultimate goal and intent of this trip.
Well, it's the same approach we've seen with the Desert Star Holding. Questions, a press conference is called by Invest St. Lucia, like you said, it leaves more questions than answers, but then the lawyer for the company or for Go Invest, I'm not sure who the lawyer was representing, but the lawyer says...
He's a legal counsel for Invest St. Lucia.
For Invest St. Lucia. Now, they cannot give information about the signed contract, not contract, what's it called?
The framework agreement.
Framework agreement. The agreement has been signed in the name of the government and people of St. Lucia. But the lawyer is saying, we cannot tell you what's in it because that's a secret. Sounds familiar? You know, that an agreement has been signed in your name, on your behalf, but you cannot get to know because it's a secret between those who signed it. Why not publish the agreement? If the framework agreement is not an agreement, as St. Lucia is saying, that's not the big thing. That's just an agreement on what we're going to agree about. Then publish it. Let us know where is exactly what are the properties the Prime Minister and the other two individuals are going to be visiting. Are they in Hong Kong, other parts of China? And like I said, my own understanding of how China operates, it can be a bit awkward. Like I said, for a Prime Minister of a state that does not have diplomatic relations in China to get diplomatic treatment akin to a head of state with diplomatic relations. Yet this head of state or head of government is representing a country that has diplomatic relations with Taiwan, which China still considers as part of its territory, which China still considers quote-unquote enemy. The unpleasantness that we experienced in Parliament on Tuesday in terms of the Prime Minister ending up in a boo-boo, that we could have another story of that before that Asian trip is over. And these are the things that I'm saying that we in the press need to better understand. The whole question of what are the similarities and the differences between China and Taiwan. Why have China and Taiwan been virtually at war for, you know, close to 60 years?
But if you and I know and understand that, you're trying to tell me that the Prime Minister and Minister of External Affairs does not understand that?
Well, maybe he has been able to, he has established the precedent, Morocco, London, Paris, along the same lines where he said these are not state visits and therefore they were not official visits and to meet governments, but fact-finding missions.
But are the Chinese and Taiwanese governments going to view it that way?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Do you want to
risk it?
I can see and I can hear the Taiwanese government complaining. Not necessarily the government, not only the government, sorry, I'm going to say not necessarily, not only the government, but also the opposition. I remember going to China with a Labour Party delegation on a party bilateral, which included the then second deputy leader of the Labour Party, who was heading the delegation, Alva Baptiste, who also happened to have been foreign minister. And a resolution was moved in the Senate in Taiwan, complaining about the fact that the foreign minister of an ally country was on an official visit in Taiwan. And the then Taiwan ambassador, James Chang, had to explain to Taiwan that yes, he is the foreign minister, but he was there in his capacity as second deputy leader
of the party.
And that's what I'm saying, that the Chinese are very, very, very high on protocol. Chinese and Taiwanese, the Asians generally are very high on protocol. And you don't just land in Beijing or Hong Kong and flash your red passport as a prime minister when you're unexpected. You know, it is, I'm not going to say they're going to put him in a room and question him and all of that, but he's not going to get the treatment of a head of state.
And he ought to know that.
Well, he's chosen.
And speaking of things he ought to know, I mean, look at the debate on the sitting of Parliament on Tuesday. I mean, the Prime Minister looked like he had never set foot in the House before. You know, he has been there as a serving parliamentarian, since then he has been in the gallery observing proceedings, you know, and you didn't expect to see what you saw on Tuesday.
Well, the thing about it is that neither he nor Mr. King seemed to be aware or to care that the mic was on. And they were being heard and seen around the world. I mean, this thing is on YouTube. You could go get it, you know, and like I said elsewhere, it's not something for us to applaud or to laugh. It is a very serious matter, because the world has seen what the world saw as a prime minister who couldn't move a bill, present a bill in parliament.
And I think most of our faces look like the back page of the Star today. Kenny Anthony's expression during that sitting.
The eyes had it.
And it says, not a word, not a word, not a word was needed. The eyes had it. Kenny Anthony at Tuesday's House meeting, the MP for Vieux Fort South and former Prime Minister, said a mouthful without uttering the smallest sound. The look on his face said it all as the sitting Prime Minister tripped over his words. I think all of us had the same reaction.
Yeah, I think the Prime Minister needs to be able to make up his mind insofar as whether he's going to be taking advice or not, because I doubt the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the technocrats at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs would have advised that the Prime Minister should go to China before going to Taiwan. Number one, it could have been it could have done the reverse. It would have meant the same, because Taiwan would have said, but Taiwan would have said, okay, you came by us and you're going over there on your business. But as I speak to you, as we speak now, I'm not sure the Prime Minister picked up the phone and called the Taiwanese ambassador and said, listen, I'm going to China, don't get vexed.
We're due for another break. Let's take it, and when we come back, we'll look at some other issues in the news. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I want us to shift our focus to one of the Star front page stories, and I'm surprised that one was not the main headline, considering the build-up last week in last week's paper. Will the new government embrace Project Jafali? A reference here to the diabetic center that Walid Jafari promised the St. Lucia government. Some would say in exchange for his IMO diplomatic position. But this article is focused on something that was introduced in last week's article, which is the team from W Science that reportedly visited St. Lucia in 2015, towards the end of 2015, September, October, or thereabout. And the report that was subsequently submitted makes some interesting revelations that I think, again, like you said, the media should explore and delve deeper into. One of the things that came out of that report that stood out for me especially is the fact that these experts are questioning the accuracy or the veracity of St. Lucia's designation as we've called it, the diabetic capital of the world. And it raises a number of issues with the health sector, the absence of a diabetes registry, the fact that if we are in fact the diabetic capital, why is there not more information available that legitimizes or explains that position? It points out the fact that there were computers donated to the Victoria Hospital to set up a registry that's still sitting in boxes. The implications of the opening of the Owen King EU Hospital in terms of our treatment of diabetes. A number of issues are raised in that article I think are interesting and worthy, you know, of further questions being asked and answers being sought by the local media, and explanations being offered by the Ministry of Health as well.
Yeah, I think I read the article, and I think it's a climb down from what was promised last week.
Really?
In that, you know, our waters are muddied and so on and so forth. I think that last week's article prepared us for, didn't prepare us for what we got this week, but certainly what we got this week has information that needs to be followed up. It's the first time we're reading publicly that there are officials in the health sector, senior officials and experienced officials in the health sector, not necessarily attached to any party, who question St. Lucia's designation as the diabetic capital of the world. But then you also read in the article that these same officials, while saying that we were given a wrong tag, they're also expressing a sort of opportunism that cannot be healthy, and no pun intended here, when they are saying that, okay, we don't agree that we think that's wrong, we're not, but let's make use of the tag to see how much we could get help for diabetes. Yet, when you
I want to correct you though on one point. Like you say, nobody came forward. We, I think, maybe failed to catch onto it and to pursue it. But two people come to mind immediately. One is Claudius Francis, not the insurance or the speaker, the president of the Senate, former president. The other Claudius Francis, the business consultant, who had some affiliation with the Diabetic and Hypertensive Association.
Okay. I didn't hear that one.
He challenged that survey. Subsequent to that, Dr. Martin Didier also challenged, if I remember correctly, at the last observance of the World Diabetes Day, you know, questioned it, and he gave a rationale for why he thought it was inaccurate. You know,
now the W Science report is saying 9%.
At least 9%.
At least 9% of the population. Now, whether we are the world's worst or the world's best,
the fact is, there's an issue.
There's an issue. What does that what does that mean for the diabetic? What the W Science report is showing is that people are still afraid to admit they are diabetic. Because of job security or other reasons. People still generally resort to traditional and alternative medicine rather than going to the doctor. And the report is saying that what they found is that when people do decide to seek medical attention, it is when they have gone beyond the point of curing, which would result in amputation. Now, this is a cultural, an unhealthy cultural practice, you know, but we need to examine why people don't want to admit they're diabetic, why they don't want to go and take treatment early. Does it have anything to do with the renal machines, the blood transfusion? There's also
don't blame the patients entirely, because according to this article, there were missed or wrong diagnoses made as well.
Yeah, but I'm saying that I'm looking at it from a national perspective. That if these conclusions are known, because I mean it's in the report, they got it from the people out in the field. As you pointed out, the Victoria Hospital doesn't have a diabetes registry, but the health centers each have had to develop their own. Has anybody decided to take them all and combine them to get a better picture?
Yeah, because I have called the Ministry of Health myself and asked for those statistics for reports and stories that I've been working on. I'm yet to get it.
You can't get it.
I asked it from since last year.
Yeah, and the ability, the willingness, not the ability, the willingness of officials to share statistics. They tend to only want to give you the positive statistics, but they are afraid to give negative statistics because somebody is going to blame them for putting out bad news. But reports, annual reports, again, the press, like you called and asked for the things. When you don't get it, the next call is going to be to somebody who's going to tell you where to go and get it on your own. This is what our job is about.
But the Ministry of Health can only give you statistics that it has, and if this report is correct, they don't
have it. They don't have it
because they've not been interested in collecting it, because they have been focused on profiting off of this.
And where is the profit? We're not seeing it. I mean, there's another thing there I noticed in the article. I don't know whether it was part of the report or whether it's it says a bird's eye view of, it should be a bird's eye view of the new Owen King Hospital. Only 4 of the 5 wings planned have been completed due to shortage of funds. The hospital was named last year amid much pomp and ceremony, but to date is not ready to receive patients. The hospital was planned for 5 wings. I have a picture of it.
Right.
The change of government in 2007 led to a decision by the then Minister of Health, Dr. Mondesi, remove 1 wing. It was a decision taken by the then Minister of Health to remove it. So to say now that it's short, is missing a wing because of shortage of funds, that is not accurate. A decision was taken to reduce the number of wings. Now, if a decision is made to put it back, I don't know whether that the intention is to put an extra wing with the W Science promise of a diabetic center to make that the 5th wing. But I still think that irrespective of whether we are the diabetic capital of the world or not, diabetics are not getting the sort of treatment and attention that they deserve, because we still, based on the report, you know, the little bit that has come out of it, we're in a mess when it comes to how we treat our diabetes patients. I mean, you go to the renal unit at Victoria Hospital in the former nurses' home. When you go there, it's like I don't know how to describe it. You just see a number of persons attached to machines, all of them naturally uncomfortable, either in pain or certainly uncomfortable, not talking to each other. You just see a bunch of sick people, and the nurses would tell you, if you ask, that the machines, they don't have enough machines. They have more patients than there are machines, but then the only way a new patient can get a machine is if one dies. Now, I mean, that is something else. And the other disclosure is that the operations, kidney transfer operations, are not made here. They're not performed here. People have to travel. And then, of course, as expected, diabetes treatment is also available at Tapio, but at a cost that is beyond the reach of many.
Well, it's an expensive period across the board. The government picks up some of the bill, but obviously, as you pointed out, there aren't enough machines. I think, if my memory serves me correct, talking about at least $5,000, you know, that has to be spent on dialysis. Most people cannot afford it, you know, so it's a serious issue that needs to be addressed. I mean, hopefully some of the Ministry of Health officials will read this article, will come out, you know, this week, and
hopefully,
you know, and even if they don't, the media will jump on it, you know, and pursue it. Let's take another break. When we come back, we'll wrap up. Welcome back. Before we wrap up, we touched on the 2 last shows on the reparations issue and some of the activities planned around that. How did the Wednesday activity go down for you?
It went well. I'm not the best person to ask, you know, after every carnival, when Teddy Francis was director of Carnival, you know, they would ask him, well, how was Carnival? Of course, it was the best, you know, best ever. As a key organizer and participant, I could only say that I was quite satisfied with the way it went. There were aspects of it that didn't happen. Air transport prevented us from having representatives from the CARICOM Secretariat. But however, that being so, we were able to get those messages, being what the media is today. Those messages were sent via tape. Pre-recorded messages, so while the people were not here, the messages were here. It was broadcast live across St. Lucia, across the region, and into the rest of the world. We were not able to entertain calls because it was a 3-hour show that went right through. I think St. Lucians are pleased that the issue of reparations is now firmly on the agenda. I mean, it was an activity that we got lots of positive comments about. Number one, the lecture delivered by Ambassador Suma. Is secondly, the stakeholders, the level of participation. You had both heads of state, Governor General and acting Prime Minister. You had most Latin American embassies here represented. There were persons of eminence like Dr. Michael Louis, who is an authority on the history of Marcus Garvey. And all of that was taking place on Marcus Garvey's birthday. It was the first time that many people got to know that Marcus Garvey visited in St. Lucia in 1920. It was the first time people got to know that the biggest crowd ever drawn in St. Lucia in 1921 was on the first anniversary of the establishment of the Universal Negro Improvement Association branch here. It was not known that Marcus Garvey had spoken 4 times at the Clark Cinema. It also emerged there that the acting Governor General, Deputy Governor General McDonald Dixon, was able to reveal to us, not formally, but in discussions later, that his mother and father were both Garveyites. We had somebody in the room, Deborah Glass, the lawyer, who is a great-grandniece of the wife of Wilberforce Norville, who was the Secretary General of the UNIA here. We had in the house Lena Santoma, who we more know as a lady who is battling stroke and advising people on how to avoid strokes, but she's the great-grandniece of John Quinlan from Laclery, who in 1897, when Marcus Garvey was only 10 years old, was selected by the Pan-African Congress to represent black people around the world in a royal commission that Queen Victoria had called on reparations. So St. Lucia has been in the lead in the reparations struggle from 1897 all the way through to the 1920s when Garvey came here. And up to now, it's coming back as a regional issue. So that was a success. I can say now that the next big one is going to be a reparations youth rally for Journée Creole. And that is because the National Reparations Committee has been able to enter into discussions and agreement with the CARICOM Secretariat and the CARICOM Reparations Commission for us in St. Lucia to host a youth rally on reparations, but in Creole, to send that message across the region in one of the least recognized but most effective indigenous languages. And therefore we are going to beam to the 7 million Creole speakers in Haiti, the millions of Haitians around the world, the hundreds of thousands of Creole speakers in St. Lucia, Dominica, Martinique, Guadeloupe, Cayenne, St. Martin, and then you have 26 nations that are member states of the United Nations that belong to the International Creole Movement. So that on the 28th of October is International Creole Day, but it is normally observed on the Sunday closest to that. Our plan is to have that youth rally on the Saturday and to have it beamed across the region and across the world. We would hope that the Governor General would be part of that, because again, she is the one who pioneered the officialdom of Creole from the standpoint that at every one of her 10 throne speeches, you know, every one of her throne speeches since 1997 has included Creole, and she was one of the founders of Mo Creole, Mouvement Creole, as a member of the Folk Research Center. So I think we were able to bring the kiss of officialdom to the reparations cause, so that people don't believe that it's just something that a few persons are making noise about. It is a regional movement, and as a matter of fact, the reparations movement that has been developed by CARICOM has gotten so big that a template has been adopted by the African Union, so that the Gambia next month when the UN General Assembly starts, during this UN General Assembly, the Gambia will be moving a resolution for the UN to back calls for reparations for slavery and native genocide. The United States Congressional Black Caucus have also adopted a similar template. And in both cases, Sir Hilary Beckles just came back from Africa. And a few months ago, he was in the U.S. to help the Congressional Black Caucus to present a resolution to the U.S. Congress in support of reparations for slavery in America, how blacks were treated. Canadians, the Canadian natives, Native Indians in Canada are looking at our template. The Aborigines in Australia are looking at our template. The Taiwanese president just a couple of weeks ago offered an apology to the indigenous Taiwanese for the way in which they have been treated. Now, she's the first president who has done that because she has indigenous blood in her. But in all of those cases, they have been able to look and see what we have been doing, because our reparations case has even gone to the House of Commons and the House of Lords. So the ALBA group last year pledged assistance to the Caribbean reparations movement, and every single CARICOM member state, every head of state who addresses the United Nations every year puts the reparations issue on the agenda, and that is going to be done again this year by Prime Minister Ralph Gonzalez of St. Vincent, now that Prime Minister Anthony is no them being the two ones who were driving it the most. So reparations is here to stay, and the next one is going to be reparations Akuyol.
Yeah, unfortunately we're not here to stay. Our time is up. A lot of other issues that we wanted to touch on that we can't because of the time constraints, but I think we've covered some good ground. Hopefully, well, I'm sure some of these stories will continue on next week. So we'll be back here next week, God willing. Hopefully you'll join us as well for another edition of the Press Club. I'll see you then.